welcome back to Room 237, and I'm back with another review. This time it is from my Criterion collection, and it is the 1988 Dutch film, The Vanishing, or under its native title, Spoorloos, if I pronounce it correctly. Now, this is a movie that I first heard of years ago, back in 2004, I believe it was, when Bravo TV did their 100 Scariest Movie Moments, where this came up as number 55, which, of course, the scary moment was the ending. They said it was the ending. They said how, pretty much what led to the ending and what the ending was, which is very unfortunate for a movie that essentially is a mystery. But this is such a well-written, executed, acted, very well-made film that even though I knew how it ended, how it got there, it was still a very effective film. So it's something I've always wanted to see since 2004, but I've never been able to find it until I was able to get my hands on this Criterion edition. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this cover. I would have preferred the original Dutch cover, which is the missing poster, which I can see here on the screen, the picture that this is supposed to make, but when I look at it with my eyes, I can't really see it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to see it, even though I knew how it ended, was because this movie really is known for its terrifying ending. And its ending is something that I've always found to be truly terrifying. I've seen it in a number of films, and eventually, once I get into spoilers, obviously I'll say what it is. And I think it is the best that does what the ending does. Now, it's a film by... I'm probably going to get all these names incorrect. I watched the special features, and I've already lost how to pronounce some of these names. George Schlautzer. That's what I'm going to say. He directed this. It came out in October of '88 in the Netherlands. The following year in France, on my birthday actually, 2 years before I was born, but December 20th. And then it was released in the States, I believe, in 90... what was it? 3? I believe it was the early 90s when it finally came over to the States. But it stars Bernard Pierre Donadieu, Jean Bourvots, and Joanna Terstage. Again, I'm probably butchering these names. I apologize if I did. I know my friend Stefan, who's Dutch, is probably going to give me shit for this. I actually butchered his name one time in a video. But, yeah, that's actually the original poster that I actually prefer. Now, it's based on the novella by Tim Crabe, The Golden Egg, and the story revolves around this couple who stop off at this truck stop, this rest area, and the girlfriend goes missing. And the boyfriend then spends the next 3 years obsessively trying to find out what happened to her. And there's some great dialogue in here about mentally how he's hanging on and how he's trying to figure out, it's like, in my mind, she's still out there somewhere. If if I pursue what happened to her, she could still be alive. If I stop but if I find out, then that means she's dead. And the actual dialogue is actually way more provocative and well more written than what I just said. But what's very interesting about this film is it's very different than this kind of mystery. Normally, okay, someone vanishes, hence the title, which actually the title Spoorloos means, it literally translates to traceless or without a trace. We actually followed the boyfriend throughout, and then we find out who did it and what happened. But here, we know who did it. We actually follow the killer in his own story as much or more than we do the boyfriend character. The mystery is actually what happened. Like, we know she's dead, but we don't find out until the very end what it is that happened to her. So, I think that's a very interesting approach to it. Like, just that kind of mystery story, that sort of without a trace kind of story, that we know right from the beginning who it is. We know that she's dead, but we don't know how. Or even, we even kind of know why. Like, we even know the motives kind of early on, but it's how she dies that we don't find out till like the next to last scene of the entire film. Now, the opening of the film is, it's this Dutch couple, Sascha and Rex. They're, boyfriend and girlfriend. They're driving around. Their car breaks down in a tunnel. He leaves to go get gas, and she's left in the dark. We see that I think we're supposed to think that's where she's going to get abducted. But he comes back, and they get to the truck stop. But here she talks about this dream she's had where she's imprisoned in this golden egg floating in space. And it's the loneliness and the sort of being trapped alone that makes that dream a nightmare. Which comes in very much into play in both the ending and the final frame. There is some subtext about how, he leaves to go get gas, and he leaves her in the tunnel, and it seems like a very bad thing to do, almost like this game that he's playing with her. The last time he sees her, they're at the truck stop, and they're kind of playing around, and she makes a promise that he will never abandon her. He'll never give up on her. He'll never leave her. Which, at several points in the film, he goes from calling her, in the third person, his wife and his friend, but when in fact they're dating. Because that whole talk about don't ever leave me makes it seem, and the whole sort of questioning of commitment makes it sound more like dating. She goes into a store to buy a beer and a soda. She comes out of the store, and from the door to the car, she's abducted. Like, he even takes a picture of her coming out of the store with the Polaroid, and then he happens to look away, and when he looks back, she's gone. And he's going all over this truck stop trying to find her. No one knows where she is. And no one even really spotted her. And then throughout most of the film, we follow the killer, who's this guy named Raymond, who is played by Bernard Pierre, who's a French actor. He's from France. He's a chemistry professor, and he's trying to see if he's capable of the ultimate evil, if he's able to pull off an act of ultimate evil. And that's sort of why this movie isn't really, you know, this has been called by actually one of my favorite critics, Mark Kermode, that this is about the banality of evil, because Raymond isn't really an evil person. He's just trying to see if he can pull it off. We find out why later. But we also see just how he plans out this whole thing. And it really kind of mirrors sort of Rex's journey of how to figure out what happened to her. You know, because 3 years later, Rex has this new girlfriend. His obsession is taking a toll on the relationship. He keeps getting letters from Raymond saying, meet me at this cafe. But he doesn't come out and address himself. He just kind of watches him from a different table. And it toys with Rex, who thinks he's either not showing up or he's watching him from afar. That toys with him. But we see Raymond's, at first we see him, plain as day, opening of the film when they get to the truck stop. Just this guy with a cast on his arm. And there are times where he does look like what we would kind of come to think a serial killer would look like. He actually kind of looks like Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys, like a serious version when he has his glasses. But, we see him obtain this property way out in the country where he goes to, he practices chloroforming himself to see how long the amount he has will knock him out for, how many miles he'll be able to drive in that amount of time, how far he can drive and come back in that time. He also practices his method of trying to coerce a young woman into his car, walking around the car, how to, reach over her to lock the door, get the chloroform on her. Practicing with nobody there, but he's going through this sort of acting routine. He has a wife and 2 daughters. To them, he bought this house as like a fixer-upper. And he does spend a lot of time out there, to where they even think he's having an affair. But they're up there at one point. They're eating dinner outside. He puts either spiders or an object in the drawer, and he asks his daughter to get the object out for him. So when she opens it, there's all these spiders. She screams, and he kind of comments about how sound carries out in the country. So he has his daughters take turns screaming as loud as they can, then his wife screams. Then later on, he asks his neighbor, he was like, there was some scare or something. I thought I heard a scream. Did you hear anything coming from out that way? And the nearest house, which is a bit away, the guy's like, no, I didn't hear anything. So now he knows that if he gets anyone out there, if they do scream, no one will hear. Like, he's learning. Like, we really see all the cards he needs to build his house of cards to pull off this ultimate evil. At one point, it even shows his birthday, where he gets a keychain of an R for either Raymond or, because his last name begins with R as well. But he also gets this photo album that his daughter has made of his entire life. There's a picture of him as a boy with the cast on his arm, and she even comments how sort of young and helpless he looks with the cast. And we can see his gears turning, and he's like, we can see him thinking like, a cast, yeah. So next time we see him, he's got a fake cast on his arm, which we've seen Buffalo Bill do with Silence of the Lambs, which was inspired by Ted Bundy. At least that part of Silence of the Lambs is based on Ted Bundy, who has become notorious for having that fake cast. And of course, the first time he tries it, he's in a nearby local area where this woman not only recognizes him, but also recognizes what he's trying to do. And actually kind of helps him by saying, hey, don't do this here. Go out to the truck stop where there's tourists and foreigners. No one will recognize you. Which, actually, first, he does it by asking for directions to a place and if he can give someone a lift there as well. You know, a very common place that they might be going to. That's when she picks up on it. So that's when he gets to the truck stop and he thinks of the cast. So he thinks to have like this tag-along trailer that he can ask to have help hitching onto his car. Of course, this one woman he asks, she goes to get her husband. He comes back and he knows what he's doing. He kind of tells him off. So we really spend a lot of time with the killer and learning how, you know, he came to do this. And we see Rex, you know, he even goes on TV to, you know, like the news to say, hey, if you're out there, I just want to know what happened. Just help me with closure. Just let me know, like, I don't care what happens to you. I just want to know what happened to her. And so, and he sees this on the TV, so he reaches out. And by this point, Rex's girlfriend has left him because she knows he's way too obsessed. He's never going to give up. I probably should say spoilers at this point. I've already given away most of the movie. But and I'm sure most people probably would think of this as like a boring mystery thriller, not really like a straightforward horror movie. But it has this very methodical pacing, like, that I love. I mean, take like a murder mystery done from a totally different direction where the mystery isn't who did it and why, but, you know, we know who and why pretty much right from the beginning, but we don't know what. And that's what the character, the boyfriend, wants to know was, you know, what happened to her. So we're riding along with him pretty much. And it focuses on the killer's background and how he built this house of cards of this whole act that he put together. So it's like a mystery, this murder mystery from a completely different angle, but with a really well done methodical pacing akin to like The Shining or The Changeling. Not nearly as long of a movie. I mean, 106 minutes. Not really as long as those two, but very well acted. Really love the cinematography as well. In fact, I watched this last weekend. There was one shot I wanted to remember. It's going to kill me now, but there was one shot I was like, I got to remember to mention that. Now I'm kicking myself in the ass because I forgot what it was. But, no, even when Rex goes on the news, he talks about the dream of the golden egg and how, you know, he feels, you know, that by him not knowing and not getting closure, it feels like she is lost in that golden egg, like her dream has come true. And also in the beginning, she says that eventually she sees him in his own golden egg, and they travel through space, but they can't get together, but they can't get to each other. So Ramis decides to meet up with him. And at first, Rex tries to beat him up, but he stops. And he plays it off cool. He's like, "You good? You done? Can we go?" So they get in the car together, they go on this road trip, and he pretty much just starts telling him his history. Like, his motives. Like, when he was a young boy, his apartment that he lived in was a few floors high, and he was standing on the balcony, and he knew that everyone's instinct is don't jump, but he did anyway. He defied his instinct. When he landed, he hurt his arm, got a cast, which was what that picture was from. And then years and years and years later, when he's with his wife and kids, they were out somewhere. They would take a family photo on this bridge. They saw this young girl who was drowning. And without hesitating, he jumped off the bridge, swam over, and saved her. And then, as they gave the girl away to her father, his daughter was like, "Dad, you're a hero." And he says something to her that's like, well, no, something about heroes, what was it he said? So it's something about their impulses or their motives that's kind of ominous. So while he's riding in the car with Rex and he's telling this story, he's like, am I really a hero? The only way I'm a hero is if I'm incapable of pulling off the ultimate evil. So that's why I'm doing this. If I can't pull this off, whether because I'm too incompetent or because I can't bring myself to do it, then I guess I am a hero. But if I can pull it off, I'm not the hero my daughter says I am. So in his own twisted way, he just wants to see if he's capable. And so, while they're in the car, Rex asks him, "Did you rape Saskia?" And he's like, "Come on, really?" And he asks him something about if he's... I've only seen this once, and I saw it last weekend. I meant to do a review then, but I probably should have watched it again. But, he asks him this certain question where he says, there are worse things than death. This is what Raymond tells him. There's worse things than death. That's a very subtle and well-planted seed of foreshadowing that will let us know what happened. Then eventually it's nighttime. He's pulled over. And the cop says, I pulled you over because you weren't wearing your seatbelt. He says, I have a card here saying I don't have to because I'm claustrophobic. That's part 2 of the foreshadowing. Eventually they get back to the truck stop where he tells Rex... Well, first he tells him what exactly happened. Because he's like, Rex tries to play with him by saying, I have this picture of you, putting you there with her in that picture, which means they'll be able to finger you for it. But of course, he plays it off like no real way of knowing it was me or whatever. But we see that he was going to do his hand, his cast and chloroform method. And he had his eyes on this other girl. And this other girl was going to help him with his trailer. And, he was like, well, do you want to get in my car? We'll drive over to the trailer so you can help me there. And she got in the car. He went to chloroform the rag, and he sneezed. And when he did, he managed to chloroform himself. Not enough to knock himself out, but he excused himself to the bathroom, rinsed off the rag, and he's like, I guess I can't do it. And then that was when he exited the restroom, and he saw Saskia, who was at the coffee machine, because in the very beginning, Rex asked the girl at the counter if he's seen this girl in the photograph he took, and she was like, yeah, she was at the coffee machine talking to some guy. She left with some guy. And that was even why the manager was like, hey, if she says she walked out with some guy, she probably left you, dude. Don't worry about it. It's only been a couple hours. She's not missing yet. Everyone kind of blew him off. Now we see she was talking to someone in the coffee machine, and she did leave with him because she noticed his R keychain, and she was like, oh, my boyfriend's name is Rex. I would love to get him one of those keychains. And she asks how much it is, and he says, like, this certain amount. She's like, I have just enough money. He's like, I'm actually a salesman for these. I have a bunch of them out in my car if you come with me. So she goes, and she sees a box that says tiles, because for his birthday, when he got the keychain, he got a box of tiles for the house, the country house. So he's like, oh, she's like, tiles? And he's like, yeah, that's the name of the product, the keychains. He's like, go ahead and get in. We can look through them together. You can pick out the one you want. She gets in. He chloroforms her. So now we see how she was abducted. But then he says, takes out this thermos, coffee that's been spiked with a sleeping drug. And he says, take this and you'll know what happened to her. You'll experience the same fate. That's how you'll know. That's the catch. If you want to know so bad, this is the cost for closure. The only way you're going to know, the only way that's right for me to tell you what happened to her, is for you to experience it yourself. And you have to pretty much drug yourself with that, and then you'll know. And Rex even says, that means I'll die. I mean, she's dead, which means I'll die, which means, me knowing means I die. And he pretty much says that's the price. And we get this great scene. I also love the music in it as well. We see Raymond in the driver's seat of his car. It's pouring rain. We see through the rain-covered windshield Rex, he's pacing back and forth on the grass in this part of the yard of the parking lot of the truck stop. We see him run up to this tree, and he's digging, and he picks out these 2 coins that they buried together before she went in the beginning of the film. They were still there. And I just love that shot of him kind of going crazy through the rain-covered windshield, which he then runs back up to the hood of the car, grabs the cup, takes it, gets back in the car, and then, they drive off. Now, the one thing I would change is a very small nitpick, but again, like I said, I knew the ending to this film because I saw that 100 Scariest Movie Moment countdown. I knew the ending. I knew what happened to Rex at the end, but still, just the event that happened is something that very personal, like one of my own personal fears. And just the way it plays out, still an effective ending. Only I didn't know there was going to be this one shot, we see a ground with, we see Raymond kind of pat a ground with a shovel. And then it's all black. And then we see the lighter come up, and we see that Rex has been buried alive. And we see, him kind of yelling for help. He's feeling all around. He's yelling for help. And that's when we know she was buried alive as well. We figured out at the same moment he did, which I think, excellent execution. as far as story, which let's see who did the screenplay for this. Oh, Sloutzer wrote the screenplay with the author of the novel. He was a big fan of it. So, and the one thing I would have changed was that shot of Raymond with the shovel, kind of filling the hole up. Yeah, it could be implied that he's dead and buried, but I think it would have been much better if the two of them sitting in the car together, fade to black, then have the black scene with him like breathing, getting the lighter out. Then when he hits the lighter, we see that. So the one thing I would change would just be take that one shot of Raymond with the shovel in the hole, which actually there's a little bit of light in the box with Raymond, and we hear like the finishing of the burial. I would have taken that out, just have it cut straight to him in the casket, and then we see Raymond and his family at that property in the country. Camera pans through. We see Raymond sitting there. Then it pans over to where, he's buried. Then we pan over to his car, where in the back window, on top of the seat, there's a newspaper that has it says like, first her and then boyfriend, both missing 3 years later. Her picture and his picture. Because we've seen her missing poster throughout the film. He's been putting up posters for 3 years. But now there's an article with both their picture together. And the way it ends is kind of like the circle point closing ending. But it ends on both their pictures in an oval, the shape of an egg, fade to black around it, so it looks like two eggs in space. They're both encapsulated in their own metaphorical egg in the blackness of space under the earth, together, but unable to reach each other. The Vanishing. No matter how I put it, it's not going to sound as good as the film is itself. Very well written. The whole metaphor with the eggs, I thought was very well used. Very little in the beginning, like just a brief explanation in the beginning, the middle, and then just a symbolic, visual symbolism at the very end. And, I think being buried alive is one of the worst things that could happen to you. It's one of my biggest fears. I've seen a number of films where characters get buried alive. There's Oxygen with Adrian Brody. There's Buried with Ryan Reynolds. There was one of the season finales of CSI when Nick is buried alive. I always find it scary, and I think this is the most effective. In fact, my favorite episode of Tales from the Crypt is from season 1. I think it's like the third episode, actually. Is the one with the guy with the 9 lives from a cat whose last feat is to be buried alive. I waited many years to see this, and I know waiting so long can kind of ruin a film. It might not always be as good as you anticipate. But this is a film I waited years to see and to find, that I knew the ending to, and I still found it to be a very effective, well-done movie. I'm sure there's things that I'm leaving out as far as, story points or camera angle, and like certain technical aspects that I wanted to mention while I was watching it. Now, the director Sloutzer actually directed an American remake with Jeff Bridges, Kiefer Sutherland, Sally Field, and that movie was actually universally panned by almost all critics. Some critics even calling it the worst remake ever made. I know, and a lot of people criticized because the ending was changed. It was a happier ending. In my last review for Chaos by David DeFalco, where his was like a nihilistic... His movie was evil wins in a very brutal, nihilistic way. This is how you do it in like a very interesting, thought-provoking, banality of evil kind of way. You know, when you have a clash of the banality of evil and someone who is obsessed with closure, a compulsive obsession and just curiosity, self-curiosity, when those two kind of circumstances meet, you know, we find out Raymond is capable of the ultimate evil, so he's not the hero his daughter thought he was. But yeah, the American one he made had a much happier ending. And even though it's downbeat, you know, it kind of teaches you there is a lesson to be learned as well. You know, there is a cost for closure. This is one of my favorite foreign films, if not my favorite. You know, I love murder mysteries anyway. I mean, I've reviewed a bunch of giallos. I have a giallo collection. This has taken a murder mystery in a totally different direction, as I've said before. You know, it's not about finding out who did it. It's not finding out who shot this guy, who stabbed this girl, who killed that person. It's we don't find out what happened to her until the obsessive character finds out himself. And I loved the metaphor of the two golden eggs in space, being encapsulated together, separately, unable to reach each other throughout time and space forever. And metaphorically, that's what happened in one of the most frightening ways that someone could die, which is to be buried alive. I loved this movie. I'm glad to have it as not only part of my collection, but my Criterion collection. You know, even if you haven't seen it and you stuck through this whole video and the ending was spoiled as it was for me, I still think it's worth a watch because it's very interesting. Also, just to see how this guy puts together how to pull off a crime. Like, he learns all these different aspects of how to pull off this crime. It's one of the most interesting murder mysteries I've seen. You know, it's not Silence of the Lambs or Seven. It's a completely different angle that I haven't really seen before. I loved this movie. I thought it was very good. Quite possibly my favorite foreign film. But yeah. Dutch film, The Vanishing. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.